praying to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pains we have. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer.
Let us pray. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we come now thank you for this day. We thank you for our last night's lying down and for our right now. We ask, Lord, that you come to this Sunday school and let your presence be known. We ask, Father, that you, my mouth, the words that come from my mouth come from you. We ask you, blessing in the God and Son, Jesus' name.
Amen.
This Bible study is for the week of March 5th, 2023, and it's lesson 10. It is love in difficult times. The background passage comes from Luke 15 chapter 11 through 32nd verse. And the print passage is Luke chapter 15, 11 through 24th verse. The key verse is, and the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Luke 15:21, and the King James Version. The introduction. This is the first of 4 lessons from our youth, called From the Margins of Society. Luke's reason for writing this gospel is found in Luke 1, chapter 1, verse 3, as he stated that he is writing to a dear Gentile friend named Theophilus, because he wanted him to have an orderly account of the life and ministry of Jesus. To Luke, Jesus is truly the Son of God, whom God sent to save the entire world, Jews and Gentiles. Luke's main reason for writing this passage is found in chapters 14, 15, and 16, as Luke shares the stories of a shepherd who has lost a sheep, a woman who has lost a coin, and a father who lost a son. We call him the prodigal son. All instances of loss are of great significance, particularly when that loss is mitigated or returned, as in the case of the lost son. There is a time of rejoicing, not only by the one who has directly experienced the loss, but by the entire community. In our lesson today, Jesus continues the parable, talking about the loss. In this chapter, we have moved from the coin being lost and the lost sheep to a father who has a son that has been sucked up by boredom, ignorance, and the greed of life. As you study this lesson, know we are of great value to God, and so our fellow Christian brothers and sisters. This lesson brings to memory the question that God asked Cain after he had killed his brother Abel. Am I my brother's keeper? That really depends on our understanding of the depth of God's love for me and my brother. Think about it. In the story of the prodigal son, the father runs to reckon the return of the younger son who had left the family household, had spent his inheritance foolishly. What things have you done where God welcomed your return to him, rather place you in his judgment? This morning we're talking, the first part is the son's departure, Luke 11 and 14. And I was studying this, I was said to myself, and I wrote it up on top of this, Can you imagine living in a home where there aren't worries, where there's plenty of food, nice clothing, comfort, everything in the world that one would want? But the younger son is disgruntled, rebellious, tired of the discipline of his father's home, and asks for his inheritance, which clearly doesn't belong to him. The son's departure, 15:11 through 14. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with righteous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. On preparing for this lesson, I did a lot of cross studying, and I found something that when I've heard the prodigal son preached a lot, but I never got from real studying who the prodigal son represented and who the father represented. So in this, it was 2 sons, the younger son and the eldest son. The younger son was greedy. And I asked, well, who does the younger son represent? And I found that the younger son represents all of those who have been called by God, but for one reason or the other have still placed 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in the church. And when this happens, God chastises whom he pleases. So who he has chastised, and he also redeems. So he brings them to their knees. He brought the younger son to his knees, and he had to, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that is who the younger son represents. He represents the part where he wants to be out here, but he also wants to be in the church. This is the beginning of the parable known, This is the beginning of the parable known as the prodigal son. However, it has been pointed out that if we were to rename this passage, our interpretation would shift. It could easily be called the man with the lost son, the missing mother, 2 lost sons, or the prodigal father. Each one of these titles would change the tint of our glasses in regards to our interpretation. However, there are some facts in this story that remain the same regardless as to the interpretive lens that is used. A man's son came to him asking if he could have his share of his inheritance. This is unusual for a couple reasons. First, he was the younger of the 2 sons. As the younger son, he would have been entitled to a lesser portion of his father's inheritance, with the lion's share being guaranteed to his older brother based on the common custom at that time. Second, he asked for his inheritance before his father's death, and that was disrespectful. An inheritance would be paid out upon death of the father in normal circumstances. The language here is interesting because as the son asked for his portion of the inheritance, The word that is used here for wealth is bios, which primary meaning is life. In this way, the sentence could rightly say that the father divided his life between them. This is instructive given that it is likely that the property being split was not merely coin money, and printed money had not yet been invented. It is likely that the father would have had to see his property, sell, yes, land or other means of production in order to give something that could have been carried like gold or silver. So that, as the text says, that he split his life between his sons. Very likely this is reference to the land, fields, or business that would have been converted to money in order to make the inheritance payout. In this, we are able to discern the level of the son's selfishness and point out how lost this son actually was. We see that today. We see children get upset with the parents, and they think that they can have it better out there. But while I was studying this, that question came to me: how many parents would be so accepting to the child coming back? Would they have gone and met him halfway? You know, there are some parents that would be, you did this, you left on your own, you know, making that child feel that much better. And then on the other hand, how many children will come back and say, Mama, Daddy, I sinned, I asked for forgiveness. How many today, the parents and the children, will have that kind of love that God is shown here in this text? As the son receives his father's inheritance, he heads off on his own. He squanders all that he had, and then a famine took place. The things go from bad to worse, as the famine caused him to be in need, as he had nothing left. The portion of the story helps to teach the lesson that we should not live at or beyond our means, because we never know when hard times might come. And I put an asterisk right there. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses. So many economic studies have shown that many people are just a few bad breaks from poverty. And so, as tempting as it is to blame the son's circumstance solely on his shoulders, we must acknowledge that he had some help in reaching the bottom. Hard times can find all of us, even if we are unlike this lost son and do not engage in dissolute living. Both the son and the father are at fault at this point in the text. The son should have never asked for his living father's inheritance. His focus should have been on spending as much time with his father as opposed to leaving. The father was at the fault because he was prodigious with his son when he should have been thrifty. There was no reason to grant the son an inheritance. He was still living. Y'all help me. Don't let me be the only one.
So in that case, the father was prodigal also.
Yes.
It's like that last verse said. He knew his son wasn't ready to go out there and be on his own, and he really didn't have to give him his inheritance. The son, in essence, I think the text say that he was wishing that his father was dead, because that's the only way he would really be able
Exactly.
to get that inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them showing a little prodigal in that sense. And like you said already, most families, and you see it a lot in today's time, our kids think they are privileged.
Exactly.
You know, they're supposed to get this and they're supposed to get that. And we as parents, we go ahead and do it for them. So we just as bad as the kids.
We prodigal too.
Okay? We just need to revert back to how we were.
Exactly. How
we
we were raised.
how we were raised. And there's a certain time you give it to them, there's a certain time you don't. And then the oldest is supposed to get his first.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of information here that we can look at in our own lives or in what's going on today and see just how not only the son is prodigal, but the father is also.
And it also let us know that oftentimes we don't learn from our or others' mistake, because the lesson is giving us an example of what to do and not to do, but still we tend to do what we feel is best and not consult the Lord. And also, with the prodigal son, we have heard parents and we heard our friends, and we may have even said ourselves, let them learn the hard way.
Yeah.
So you let them go. Give them enough room to, as they say, hang themselves. A lot of them will come back and destitute, and there's a minor few that might become successful. But even if the minor few that become successful would do the right way, they can be like Joseph. They can have an abundance.
And then once they come back, you know, do they feel worthy? Is it always being thrown up in their face where you left? You know.
And I think we'll get into that. We'll put
Okay.
it in the lesson. I don't want to jump ahead of you there, so I don't think I reserve that.
But speaking about the hard times, that's something not only for the prodigal, but for adults as well. We spend lavishly, not thinking about tomorrow or down the road. Like the lesson was said, if you become ill and can't work for a couple of weeks, you can be destitute. And then the way society is, you won't be able to qualify for assistance because they look at your income. And if the income for that year is going to exceed that little minor bump in the road, they won't assist you. And your family probably won't be able to assist you either.
Number 2, the son's return, Luke 15, verses 15 through 20. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. Now, this part is where the father, I'm saying, okay, who does the father represent? The father represents God the Father, but he gladly receives his son as part of his family. When the son returns, that shows a picture of what repentance is. The father, just as God the Father does, show his love is unconditional. He accepts him back the Father gives His Son what He does not deserve, and that's grace. And withhold what He actually did deserve, and that was mercy. So let's talk about this. So, if we as parents, are we giving our children grace? Are we giving them, or every time that something comes up and we're criticizing, and you see so many people, on the news, they're telling that he didn't deserve it. Is that why so many of our children are going to the left? Is because they aren't getting the love, they aren't feeling the unconditional love in the house.
I think that we kind of missed the mark, because oftentimes you hear the parents saying, well, I want my kids to have it better than I had it, not realizing that we're making them privileged, not realizing that we're giving them things that they need to try to earn to understand the importance of working hard themselves.
And then you can look at it. One thing I see in this second section is the son, when they say he came to his senses, it's like that scripture say, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's going to get to a point in his life, he'll come back to it, because they say he won't depart from it. And then he had the urgency, or he realized his condition and knew that, hey, I had it better at the home. So by him coming to his senses, he was ready to go back home. And he already planned a skit, which the skit wasn't needed. Because when you think of, he went home and the dad did something, to make sure I say this right. No, I'm not going to go there yet. But the dad did one thing that, if you read chapter 15 of Luke, you had the lost sheep. But the shepherd went out and got him. You had it was the shepherd's fault that he was lost. You had the lost coin. The woman cleaned up her house until she found it. But the lost son, dad, didn't go nowhere. He sat right there because the son left. Now he was looking for him to return. He's waiting for him to return. But he did not go out there and try and bring him out of the streets. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes my kids leave home and I got to go get them. If they left on their own, they're not going to be ready to come back until they decide to come back. You can't bring them back.
And the dad let him go, but he also knew he was going to come back, because he watched for him every day. And then he knew his son so well, he knew how this boy walked, because he said for a long way off, he saw him.
I tell Sister Simmons that all the time. Larry. I don't care where y'all saw Larry in Ashland. I knew there was a Larry, and there's another one. Joe Lewis. Is it Joe Lewis? Got walk with that little funny. There's two people in Ashland. I don't care how far away they from me. I know who those two are.
Yeah. So, so we'll continue. After reaching the bottom, the son went and found a job that would have previously been below his station. He is now at his lowest point, particularly considering that it is assumed that he was a Jewish man. As such, working with pigs would have been considered a job reserved for Gentiles. Nonetheless, because of the position he is in, he must do what he must do. It was so bad that even the pigs had more than he did. In the same manner as this lost son, there are times in which we must do what we must do. Given that hard times have the propensity to find us all, there may be times that we take jobs that we would prefer not to do. However, the drive to live and to be productive should overwhelm any sense of pride that we may have in our condescending our position. It is important to know that the lost son also had no one to come to his aid. Part of his story was written through his own foolishness, another part by the famine. But the other is that there was no one physically close to him that was willing to help. This speaks to the geographical distance that he put between himself and his father's house. If he had been closer to his family, there is a chance that he may have found more opportunity than being in a distant country. In many ways, this speaks of the power of network and the need for others in our lives. God places us in community so that we can be propped up in our moments of weakness. But it is dangerous to shun our communities because at times this is God's way of protection and provision. After realizing how far he had fallen, the lost son has a conversation with himself and decides to return home. The lost son, who has spent the majority of the story refusing to be honest with himself, is now internally brutally truthful. He also devises a plan on how he might gain acceptance to his father's house. Once again, even still, he needs no plan. He simply needs to show up. And in that hog pen, when he said to himself, my father's servants have more than I have now. They even have some leftovers, and here I am in the hog pen and have nobody to offer. Oh, why I had all my money, I had plenty, but now when I'm in need, there's nobody around, nobody to offer.
And that's what's so good about living here in Ashland. If you was born and raised here in Ashland, and you stay hanging around, I don't care how low you fall, there's always will be somebody around here to pick you up. Because one thing I've learned since I've been here, hey, everybody is somebody's family around here.
Exactly.
So there shouldn't be no homeless in Ashland. There shouldn't be really no hungry folk. Mm-hmm. Because of the community, they say it takes a village to raise a child. I think we're losing that the more society has grown. Because I'm sure back when y'all were growing up, there was very little you could do that. Mama.
Amen corner right there. You couldn't get away with anything in the church, outside the church. Nothing.
So we have lost that. Because in today's society, some of these folks don't want you to touch their child.
Exactly.
Until it's too late.
Some of them don't want you to say anything to their children, and that is how these children are growing up. That is why it's so much stuff going on in the school, because the children will tell you, my mama said. And then the child go home and tell mama come up there and she's raising all kinds of sand, and it's, I've looked at that system. It's all because the children don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to school, and it's sad.
And it's always, they don't like me. They're always picking on me. And a lot of times we as parents, we fall for that. And all we need to do is just go out, have a counseling session with the teachers, You know your kids. You know if they're telling the truth or not. You know their behavior better than the teacher does. But sometimes we don't want to believe our eyes and our own ears.
And one other thing, the son looked within himself. He realized. And once he came to that point, I don't care what the father would have said to him when he got home, he would have been satisfied. But you have, like, I think you might have brought it up that kids go home and if they hear anything negative, then they want to take off and run again. But I don't think nothing the father would have said negative in this story would have caused the son to leave.
The father didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to say anything. He was just glad to see his son back. He ran to him. The son didn't run to him. The father ran to the son and laid his head on the son's neck. So he was just glad to have his son back.
Shouldn't it be that way when somebody from the outside comes?
It should be.
In the church?
It should be. The church I was at, when we had members in the hall, in the aisle here, and we didn't let them walk to the front by themselves. We walked with them. So it should be that here.
But what I see, and not only this church, if somebody was out there in the streets for 10, 20, 30 years, and they finally decide to come in, when they do come in, you hear the negatives out of the pew. And that caused the person to come through the front door and go straight out the back door.
Exactly, and never come back.
I guess that speaks to what you were saying. A lot of time we say we're in the church, but is the church really in us? Because certain things you will do and certain things you won't do. And it all depends on your maturity in Christianity, where you really are.
And I think this story needs to happen to some of us that's in the church today. They need to go out there and experience the world. And once the world beat them down, when they come back in, you don't have to worry about them learning nothing. You got them to do it.
But when you talk about, I think you started out talking about 1 foot in the church and 1 foot out of the church, and those are the characters that the lesson is representing. It let us know that he says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone, so the opportunity is extended to everyone.
Exactly.
But it's those that hear his voice and seek him, and they will find him.
But and sometimes it's the coldness, the coldness that they receive. I can remember when I came back to New Providence, and I joined the choir, came back, and we had a meeting, and I told Reverend Brown, if I had been a babe in Christ, I would have left that same night. Because all these people know me, but this is another lesson. But you got to grow sometime. So, but that's another lesson. Okay, the third part, the father's compassion. Okay.
About the support system. I think your situation may have been different from mine, because I still had siblings within the church when I returned. And I don't think you had.
Nobody at McGill. I had McGill when she.
You have to have a support system. If you go to a strange state, county, and if you don't know anyone, it's going to be extremely hard. But if you have someone there that you know that can assist you, can tell you the road that's less traveled, is the easy one in that area to go, it makes a difference. But if you go to someone that loves to party and do the wrong things and you get caught up in that atmosphere, you're going to have a dime problem.
Exactly. The Father's compassion, Luke 15, verses 21 through 24. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet,
and bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to be merry. True love forgives and is ready to receive our loved ones with open arms. It does not matter the offense of what was done to cause the separation. It was right for the son to come to his senses, realizing the father's care for his servant was better than his living condition. The prodigal son returns, hoping that he can again experience some of the father's care, or even live as a hired servant. As the son was returning home, he rehearsed his speech, stating, "He is not worthy." Approaching his father's home, his father sees him and runs to him, greeting his son, who was lost with the holy kiss, proclaiming it was time for celebration. To assure the son that he had forgiven him and he is not forsaken, notice the distinctive action of his overjoyous father. He tells his servants to stop doing whatever you are doing and let's get ready for a celebration. He is going to completely restore his son into the family. He has him bring the best robe, a sign of royalty, put a signet ring on his finger to let everyone know that they are one, and put some sandals on his torn, worn, dusty, and muddy feet. Lastly, he instructs the servants to kill the fatted calf for a regal celebration. It is not time for a big celebration. The celebration is in line with the two previous stories that Luke tells. Luke in chapter 15 tells parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin. In both instances, when the object that was previously lost is found, the main character rejoices with her community. This should remind us that when the lost are found, it is not just a celebration for the family, but the entire community. It is cause for celebration for the entire community because it is in the moment of restoration that the community is made whole. In the same way that the community is to rejoice, God and his angels throw a heavenly party when the lost return to God. Often we do not seek God's guidance for our lives, and when we err, we do not seek his forgiveness and the ones we have wronged. Our Heavenly Father is always waiting for us to come to our senses and come to him. We are to admit when we are wrong or have wronged someone. There are many lessons to take from this story. First, just because our children ask, we are under no obligation to give them what they ask for. This is true particularly when what is asked is done in selfishness and self-interest. Second, hard times can find any of us in a far-off country. Thirdly, do not underestimate the power of network and community. It can give us in moments of difficulty. Fourth, love always forgives and is ready to accept even those who have wronged us.
One thing I was thinking that last section, where they say the father went off and hugged him and covered him, he was in actuality protecting him. Because in those days, the son had did something where the community could have killed him.
It could have killed him.
But by running out and covering him, he let the community know, hey, I have restored him back. And that's one thing we have to do is, not only as Christians, but as people. If I hear something about you, and somebody come and tell me something about you, and say you've been doing this and doing it, before I run out in the street and spread it, I need to tell them, no, not the Sister Dawes say I know. that's how we protect one another.
Exactly.
Now, if we find out that something did happen, then we go come to you and try to correct it. But we shouldn't take every story we hear and take it out there and spread it. And we should shut that person down before they go and spread it elsewhere. And that's how he was covered. He's keeping them, and we have to learn how to cover one another.
That's
And
right.
we don't do that in our society or in the church.
Yes, that's true.
Sometimes when we think someone offended us, rightly or wrongly, we tend to want to shun the person, and we make statements about, oh, this is this, and I'm never gonna forgive them, I'm gonna take it to the grave with me. But you only harming yourself, you're not really doing any harm to the individual, if we understand it in that sense. And when we talk about community being supported, we don't understand that if the community that comes together, we can do extraordinary things as one. But we have to be unified. But we're too fragmented. Everybody's concerned about me, myself, and I. And that was you when you were young about when you bless the food. If you would say, all of my mom and kids, I love their company. Self-preservation.
And that is so true. I think what I've seen since I've been back in Ashburn, the community comes together for more negative than positive, you know. But how do we change that when the mindset that they have, sometimes they don't want to hear anything else?
If we could, as Ms. King used to say, I could just open you all, cut you all there, open it with in it. If we could get the older generation to understand that we need to start trying to input more into the younger generation, if we may have missed our kids, but our grandkids, try to instill some of those values in them. But sometimes when we're like at the prodigal son age, we don't want to hear what you have to say because those were the old days and things are different now. That's the mentality. But nothing is new under the sun. So we're going to the next generation and hope we can have air with our kids and in the life and life to the next generation.
And then the next generation, you know, we talk about, let's talk about the millennials. It's, you know, they are raising children now. So they have to be able to instill the morals and the values. But exactly.
But I'm so happy you said that. The millennium, they're letting you two and other programs raise the kid, and
Raise the
you would
kids.
be amazed at some of the stuff they be saying and doing on YouTube. And I'm like, are we falling further and further away? It's like more going to the left and going to the right.
But they will tell you quick that they are right. You know, they have thrown everything biblical out.
Integration.
We are challenged because our kids or our grandkids for us or great grands, they have too much access to these computers, these phones, or I should say modern technology. So even though we're in a pandemic, we should be having, Sunday school should really be full now. because the kids learn more off of the phones and the computers than they're learning from us. And
That's true.
We know what they have to offer.
And these children are being given phones to keep them occupied as early as 2 years old. Yes. So, anyway, the application and review. This is one of the most popular stories in the Bible, with good reason. The lost son asks for what is not his yet, and in doing, ruins his own future. Hard times can find anyone, but particularly those who engage in dissolute living. If and when hard times find us, let us take a page from the lost son's book and not be ashamed to do whatever is needed in order to get by. But most of all, let us follow the heart of the Father who only wants to see the best in his Son. Let us be those who are quick for reconciliation but slow to take offense. Live it. There are folks who wander away from the church and God. When this happens, we should do as the parable suggests. Look for them as the shepherd looking for his sheep or the woman who has lost corn, and be prepared to welcome them with open arms and rejoice in celebration upon their return. Can you think of a person who you can invite into fellowship with the church and God? Share it. It is never too late for God's children to come to their senses and realize that God's desire is for us to be cared for by his unfailing love, even when those close to us are not happy for us. God stands always with open arms. I wrote the summary. The parable of the prodigal son is a story about God's redemptive grace and mercy. It is a story of his unconditional love and forgiveness. It is about God seeking sinners. Jesus told this parable to the religious and Jewish crowd there to help them understand that salvation does not come by works, but by the grace of God. Jesus was teaching against their tradition as far, and for that they would have been offended. The Jewish people, like some people of today, would have disinherited the son. The younger son's behavior was highly insulting to the father as a matter of tradition. And Deacon Sims said, in that day, if the father hadn't covered him, the Jews could have stoned him to death. But his covering did show that he, like God does for us, restored him back into the family. Yes.
And like you said, the Father's covering him. It's like Jesus' blood covers us. That's all God sees. We don't see us.
See the blood. All right, that's the lesson. If we stand to be dismissed. May the Lord watch between me and thee. We are absent one from another.